A number of years ago, I was on a labyrinth facilitators project with my friend Christy Walker, and we were heading toward Fort Wayne, Indiana, for a labyrinth conference. And just a couple of days before we left for the conference, I got a phone call asking if we could pick up a couple other participants who were traveling all the way from Mexico to the event, but as far as they could get was to Chicago. And they wanted to know if we could help them to connect on the final leg of the journey. And of course, I said, yeah, sure, we'll be happy to pick them up. And it was someplace near 26th and California. This is a number of years ago, and I had never even been on the South Side. And the conference started pretty early in the morning. So I needed to pick up my friend Christy at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And then we had to drive to the South Side to pick up the other participants. And it was still very, very early in the morning. It was very dark, and the location turned out to be on the back side of the Cook County Jail. We drove up along this large cyclone fence with rolls and rolls of barbed wire, and I think it was a search tower and bright lights and dogs. It was all like something out of a film. That the two guys came out of the house and jumped in the car, and we were all on our way together, headed toward the Illinois Indiana border. I had timed the journey out pretty good, and we were going to arrive in Fort Wayne exactly at 9 o'clock in the morning when the conference began. But halfway through the state of Indiana, we crossed over from Central Standard Time into Eastern Time, and now we were going to be exactly 1 hour late. I informed everybody in the car of the situation, and I said, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to pretend we don't know. We're going to show up as if we're right on time. And you know what? We're going to be well received because we're traveling all the way from Chicago. And we did arrive at the conference in exactly an hour late, and we did just like I instructed. We all played it very cool, and we were graciously received and welcomed in. And the conference stopped to welcome us and seat us all, and we were all gratified by the experience. And as we continued on with the conference, I noticed the special guests from Mexico were welcomed in to another gathering apart from the rest of us. And it kind of dawned on me that, we weren't the honored guests. We were bringing the honored guests. Welcome to Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we talk about everything and nothing. Topics have included finding a plumber on Christmas, the difference between a cure and a healing, and that there's a T in the word anecdotal. This week, of course, we talked about our friend Monica Brown. We talked about her chickens, her bees, her dog, and everything else in between that she loved. At church on Sunday, the readings were from Isaiah that were hidden like a golden arrow in a quiver. And from Corinthians, God provides everything we need, all spiritual gifts that we need to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And the gospel reading was about Jesus calling his disciples. The sermon at Washington National Cathedral was by Dr. Paul Smith, who's a Presbyterian minister. He started off by giving us some facts about his life and said that we could fact check it if we liked. And he said, they tell me I'm a Presbyterian minister. And he said, I do have the Book of Order on my desk, but I don't always follow it. Dr. Smith talked about spending our lives in the shallow water when the deep water is sometimes beckoning us. He shared a quote growing up about how he was told that sometimes, he'd rather go to hell with intention than slip into heaven with the crowd. He talked a little bit more about following the rules, and Jen Cope actually talked also about following the rules last Sunday. And Dr. Smith said sometimes, we need to call for an insurrection. And he wondered, why we weren't all storming the Capitol for whatever it is we believe. He said, where are all the voices? Of course, this was Martin Luther King Sunday. And he said, where have all these voices gone, the prophetic voices? And who is it that's silenced them all? He asked, where are the churches, the synagogues, and the mosques? He said, we can't just keep coasting along. We need to go out into the deep water. And we all need to say something. We don't need to be right. We just need to be heard. Dr. Smith wasn't right about anything, and it didn't really matter to me. He did get kind of political, but I really didn't care. I didn't need to agree with everything Dr. Smith was saying. I was just happy hearing it. We don't need to be right to be heard. Dr. Smith said that race, class, and being politically correct just keep us in the shallow end of the pool. The point is not to agree, but to see the other person. We don't need to fact check the background of the sermon or know anything more about this person. We just need to hear what he's saying. Dr. Smith, I think he might have had some infirmity because he didn't preach from the pulpit this Sunday. He preached from a lectern on the steps instead. And behind him, you could see Jan Cope. She was behind him in the distance, and he could make out kind of her reaction as he preached his sermon. And I love Jan. Jan made a joke once about Fourth Presbyterian Church, including a story that John Buchanan liked to tell. It was the story about how if you're looking for the Spirit, you probably didn't find it here. In my interactions with Jane, she always suffices to say in her emails that basically she's giving her blessings to me. I love Jan's smile, and she did a good job of holding her presence, her stage face of a very contemplative smile throughout Dr. Smith's sermon. But at times, her smile bordered on a mild look of consternation. I think we all live our lives somewhere between a smile and consternation sometimes. When I was younger, I prided myself on having a pretty good poker face that belied everything I was thinking and feeling. But as I've gotten older, I feel like my countenance belies everything that I'm thinking and feeling. Maybe it's because I'm more in the deep water than I was in my earlier life. But I prefer looking like I'm in the shallow water. I recently came across some material about Wallace Simpson, and apparently in her time she occupied this strange space of being either the most despised person or the most hated person in her time. And the commentary mentioned that she was somebody who made the best of a bad situation, and sometimes we seem to make the worst out of a good situation. That's the whole point. We need to occupy whatever space we have and make the best out of it. The sermon at St. James this Sunday was by Lisa James, and she asked if we're pointing to God. Do we see God and then point to that, or do we see where God is not and instead point to that? Would you rather be here or anywhere else? Is another question that Lisa asked. She said, probably truth be known, and she did cite a story of Martin Luther King when he contemplated that very idea. Would he want to be anywhere else in history, in any other time or place in history? And he decided that, in fact, he wanted to be exactly where he was. And I think that's what most of us probably would decide. Maybe it's not even the best life we think we're having, but it's our life, and it's the one thing we truly, truly have. We're all happy to occupy this space that we have. Lisa also talked about how the Holy Spirit provides everything we need to do what we need to do. I've definitely experienced that I have everything I need to do, and sometimes it often surprises me what it is I'm able to accomplish. But then after that's done, there doesn't seem to be anything extra for anything else, and I just go back to occupying the space of my regular crummy self. In the Bible, I'm always heartened by passages like about how even evil people can give good gifts. For me, this is an opportunity. Monica was Monica was one of the worst people I ever knew. She always showed up when I was doing something really, really important. She'd show up when I was at the garden and I'd have to put down my hose to talk to her. Or she'd show up at Stone Chapel when I was trying to get all those little cups into the communion trays. She'd show up to pray. Sometimes I'd run into her during sandwich making in the parish house dining room. And, I'd tease her and others about, cutting off the crusts of the sandwiches. And I'd sometimes request if I could come back for a toasted watercress sandwich. And for whatever reason, I'm still waiting for that watercress sandwich. But the reason Monica was one of the worst people I know is because she was always interrupting me when I was going about the business of these very important things. And she always made me stop what I was doing to focus on her because I wanted to. We all have to stop sometimes to recognize and see the people we love in our lives. And Monica was always that opportunity, in spite of all the really, really important things I was doing. So we were all on a very unexpected journey with Monica, even though we didn't know it. Monica started complaining about being tired last summer in June, and then she had a kind of a persistent cough. And we suggested different remedies, including the hot toddy with honey from our own beehives, and silly things, I guess, now in retrospect. But we tried to be the helpful people and friends that we could be at the time. And then as it escalated, she shared that she thought maybe it might be growing into a case of bronchitis. And this continued to escalate into fall, and she continued to share her frustration. She told me that, she used to be a horseback rider and a very sporty and active person. And she was so sad that she no longer seemed to be that person. It was the gap between who she was and who she was now. I was reminded of Claire Booth Luce, who later in her life reflected that she seemed to be occupying the space of her former self, and that her former fame and notoriety had waned, but somehow she still was walking in that same space. So we kept pushing Monica on each Sunday at coffee hour, what path she was pursuing, and how we could help and how we could intervene in some way. And about the last 2 weeks, we finally had a really kind of a heart-to-heart, firm confrontation with Monica on the call. And Susan intervened to actually make a doctor's appointment for Monica. And after the call, I had a lengthy phone conversation with Monica about all her issues with the medical profession. And Monica shared with me that as a Black woman, she was reluctant to pursue medical help because she would be disrespected and mistreated by the medical profession. I was startled by that, especially the part about how, as a Black woman, and I put that aside because I respected the fact that Monica and many other people are having a very different experience than I'm having. So Monica and I moved on in the conversation, and I tried to see with her how we could see the doctor's appointment and go into the hospital as an opportunity that she could avail herself to, that would take her to the next level of opportunity. I have to say, it took all my mental strength and will and bandwidth to really walk with Monica through this whole dilemma. And all my energy was focused on encouraging her in every way I could to make the right decision, whatever that was for her. But I was really going to be devastated if she didn't go on the doctor's appointment. That week I left for Atlanta, and I continued to encourage her in all the ways I could to do whatever she thought was best for her, or do for her particular situation. While I was in Atlanta, she did take the doctor's appointment, and she was admitted to the hospital that day. During that week that followed in the hospital, she was able to take care of last minute details with her dogs and her other affairs, and put herself in order. She basically bought herself another week. Susan, of course, was instrumental in all of this, and Susan kept pressing Monica during that last week, asking her repeatedly if she had any family. Monica continually said she did not have any family. They were all deceased. And Susan kept asking, Monica, do you have any family? Susan finally asked on Saturday, the day that Monica died, in the morning, Monica, do you have any family? Monica finally shared that yes, she had a cousin who she was not close to, and she gave Susan the number, and Susan called him. This gentleman happened to be on vacation in Brazil at the time, and he was surprised and startled by the call, but he was receptive and willing to do whatever needed to be done. I was on my way to the hospital on Saturday when I experienced an unfortunate mishap, which prevented me from being there in time. I was exactly 1 hour late. During the picking up of all the pieces of my mishap, everyone who helped me was very supportive and got me on my way. And when I was ready to go, I received a phone call from Susan that Monica had died. And I announced to everyone that, this mishap had made me exactly 1 hour late from being with my friend when she died. So when I got to the hospital, I was able to say goodbye to Monica. She was still warm and really she looked lovely. She was radiant and glowing. I told Monica that. I told Monica, you look lovely and beautiful. I thanked Monica for sharing herself with us as best she could and that we loved her. I also explained to her that we tried to be the best friends that we could be and love her in all the ways that we could. And finally, I told Monica that I respected her for making choices which were authentic to her. Susan and I went downstairs to the Beatrix restaurant, and Susan ordered a glass of champagne. So I joined her, and we decided to toast Monica. Nancy from church joined us shortly after, and she also joined us with a glass of champagne, and we enjoyed a lovely meal together. I'm not sure if Monica was a Beatles fan or a Rolling Stones fan. I think these are probably my version of modern day Proust interview questions, but it's similar to the idea of whether you're a Disney or Warner Brothers cartoon fan. I'm more akin to, in the cartoon genre, of the genre ending, the drama ending with someone having an anvil fall on his or her head, and I kind of think Monica might have been of the same ilk. So we spent time informing others or in the circle of Monica's death, and it was so interesting to me to hear some of the feedback and comments. Tim Shellhart shared with me that he always enjoyed talking to Monica, even though sometimes she seemed like a mystery to him. Morgan Simmons shared that Monica was a special and lovely woman. And Diane, she shared with me the idea that, there were a lot of things right about Monica's decision-making with her healthcare. Tom Gowan said that, he really resonated with the idea of what has happened to everyone's voice. And I think he cautioned us that we all know that when we do speak out, we're often excluded and tossed aside. Monica, for whatever reason, found it necessary not to be as candid as she might have liked to have been. And I hope it wasn't for the reason to think that we might reject her or cast her aside. But I do know that was part of her hangup with the medical community, that she would be mistreated and not regarded. But there were no recriminations in all the follow-up and all the responses we had to the announcement of Monica's passing. We just had love and kindness surrounding. When I notified the people at First Presbyterian Church, I know they were all sad to hear that news. I could give an entire sermon about the First Presbyterian Church. Monica was involved in that community as well through our mission work days and from visiting me at the garden. The First Presbyterian Church people definitely have, they definitely operate from the operating platform of abundance versus scarcity. And they have certainly made the best of a bad situation as opposed to making the worst of a good situation. It's a cautionary tale. We hear in the Bible that those who are first are often last, but sometimes it's the fourth people who are last. To those, too much is given, much is expected. You know, I don't make this stuff up. All the women at First Presbyterian Church have are just remarkably attractive. I don't know what that phenomenon is about, but it's always a pleasure to visit First. And they always have such a warm tradition of hospitality. Whenever I think of hospitality, I think of C.C. Zuba and the lovely tribute paid to her by Francie Harrington at her memorial service. Francie gave a terrific eulogy, and whenever she started to tear up, she had this wonderful manner of just turning aside from herself and stepping away from the lectern for just a moment, give herself just a little space. I was always intrigued by that. Sometimes we all need to step aside from ourselves and give ourselves a little space. In the photo of Monica that I posted of her in the kitchen at First Presbyterian Church, if you look closely, ironically, there's a pineapple behind her in the background, and I was so intrigued by that because the pineapple is a symbol for hospitality. So I guess we all need to ask, you know, what is in our background? Are we extending hospitality even when we ourselves don't always feel so comfortable or welcome? I think there's empathy in that. And if you can't have empathy, you can have consideration. When Nancy joined us at dinner and spent so much time with us at the Beatrix restaurant, I complimented Nancy on being so generous with her time. And I said, you know, it's the fact that you've considered Susan and I in this moment, and that's what the definition of being considerate is. And when I complimented Nancy for this, she kind of got this deer in the headlight kind of look. So as I explained to people who were so nice and so generous in their compliments and thanks to me on a Sunday call for what I did in helping Monica connect the dots to where she needed to go, I explained to people that it was literally all I could do. I was completely spent and burned out. It took all my bandwidth and energy to contribute my small part. It's all I could do to get her to take the appointment. And I admitted that. So I'm not even an advocate for medical intervention, but for whatever reason, in Monica's case, I saw it was critical to where she needed to go, and it was the opportunity she needed to take her to the next opportunity. On the call, I sometimes wonder if people think I'm made out of plastic, and I'm not altogether uncomfortable with that image. I don't know if I'd eschew that that image, but I'm really not made out of plastic. And you know, people looked at people like Pat Nixon. I think she was called Plastic Pat, and you know, sometimes it's the most plastic, superficial people who have the most substance. And at Pat's funeral, I remember Richard Nixon, you know, really just literally bawling his head off in grief, because I think even Richard Nixon knew which better part of that union. I also explained to people on the call that as much as I was happy to contribute what I can contribute, I was really blown away, and I had to preface this by hoping not to sound sexist, but I was really blown away by the women. The women in this story, in Monica's story, they really stepped up. Like they did things that they went to places that no man has gone before and really can't go. And most particularly in the situation of Susan Bogey, Monica gave a lot of resistance and in many ways made Susan the figurehead of all of her issues. She just put it on Susan. And I think that's probably because Susan's a very strong person. There was some sort of control issue going on as well. And Monica had lots of different hangups with that. And Monica explained to me that she felt pressured to take this appointment. And then if she didn't take the appointment, she was going to need to apologize to Susan, and she didn't want to apologize to Susan. I told Monica she didn't need to worry about Susan, that Susan would take care of Susan, that she didn't owe Susan an apology, and she didn't need to worry about any of that. But Susan had a definite gift to bring, and Monica did receive the gift, and she received a healing, if not a cure. When I was talking to my friend Leslie about all this, she said, "Well, was your friend like Christian Science?" And I said, "No, it was it really wasn't that. But I said, the Christian Science, those people, they get the bad rap because they are talking about healing. That's what they're talking about. And I've personally witnessed healing in the Christian Science church, and that healing is still reverberating. Most notably, I think of Lois Carlson and her amazing story of healing herself and others. Our journey at Sunday Coffee Hour has been such a blessing to so many of us, and so many thanks go to all the people who've been with us on this journey with Monica together: Judy and Tom, Monroe and Patrice, Dr. Leslie, Laura, David, and Svetlana. We've all availed ourselves to this opportunity that took us to the next opportunity, the opportunity of witnessing Monica's healing. It is like a miracle. So whatever our ultimate destination may be, we need to continue to welcome the opportunity. At Washington National Cathedral, they often end the service with something, this benediction about how we haven't much time to gladden the hearts of others. I'm so glad that my heart was gladdened by Monica's presence, and I've been gladdened by the presence of others on this journey together, in spite of myself, in spite of pushing people's buttons. I think we've all journeyed together and experienced something that's truly remarkable. Jesus didn't come to say, have a nice day. He came to say, get a life. If you'd like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour, details of Monica's death will be included in the description of this video, and I will also include my email in the description, and I'd be happy to send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.